Welcome to Die Hard on a Blank, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. I'm Philip Cawthorne, and with me as always is Liam Billingham, and today's film is Nick of Time.
It's Die Hard in real time. Tick, 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 tick. Clocks. Which watches?
Ticking clocks everywhere. It's the ticking clock movie. So
Ticking clocks.
This was a fun one. I had fun with this.
I did too. That was a Christopher Walken impression.
Ticking
clocks.
Well, there's going to be some, bear with us, there'll be some potentially pretty bad.
My daughter is dead. Say it.
Christopher Walken impressions.
You thought it was bad on the Speed episode. You have no idea.
I need to work. My Walken is terrible.
He's a tough one to do.
It really is. It really is pretty hard.
I haven't killed anyone since 1984. Now, see, that's the thing. It's like he's from Queens, but it's like he doesn't sound like he's from He's a tough dude.
It's a tough one to nail.
He is great in this movie.
He is sensational in this. I really did have. I hadn't seen this since it came out, and I remember my history with this one was in the good old days. With like Empire Magazine used to do this thing. This is super nostalgia. They would have video cassettes that would come with the magazine of all forthcoming trailers.
Oh my God.
Which I would watch on a loop.
Halcyon Days.
It was the best. And this was one of those trailers. And I remember just thinking, like, what an incredible concept for a movie.
Yeah, it's a good concept.
Not only the idea of like, hey, you have to go and kill this politician in 90 minutes or else we, kill your loved one. But the fact that it was all in real time, was just a brilliant conceit and gimmick, I thought. So I remember being like really excited about this. And it was John Badham, who I'm a huge fan of, from Blue Thunder and Short Circuit and Stakeout, Hard Way. He's made so many movies I love.
Isn't it weird how I feel like John Badham's movies have largely kind of, I don't want to say disappeared from the culture, but like I watched Stakeout and Another Stakeout like 25 times.
Absolutely.
Stakeout, I'm more of a Stakeout guy. They are really good. Did he direct Another Stakeout as well? Yeah. So they're both really good. And like, I feel like I rented them all the time as a kid. Like my dad would be like, you're renting.
I owned them, both.
Yeah. And he directed Bird on a Wire, which is an underrated Mel Gibson.
I have actually never seen that.
It's on Netflix right now. I was watching it the other day.
That's one of the weird, just that one I is a blank spot for me.
You should watch it. There's some things in it that don't hold up.
Okay.
Maybe the lead and also some other things in it. But it is, it's kind of like a action comedy, the kind of which but it also like, it's that action comedy where like they don't, just because it's a comedy, the action is still good. The action is still like, is powerful stuff. I had not seen this movie until this week, but I was very aware of it. Let's say cultural imprint and the fact that it was in real time was something that I was always very, very aware of. I remember when it came out. I mean, an interesting fact when we get into our top line facts about this movie about its release date that I think we should talk about, which is really interesting.
You want to? Well, let's do it. Let's do our fast facts. I'm rebranding it. Fast facts.
Oh, fast facts.
Yeah, so we just kind of
because we only have 90 minutes to get to this podcast or our children will
ticking.
die.
Let's go.
Oh, no, start. Jesus.
Whoa. This podcast suddenly got really intense. The stakes just went through the roof. Okay,
wait, quick pitch. Podcaster in the nick of time situation. I don't know what it would be, but
it's going to be a pass.
Wow, I've gotten some fast passes in my time, but
yeah, we love the writing. It's just not for us on that one. Nick of Time was released in the US by Paramount Pictures on November 22nd, 1995. Do you want to tell your date story now?
I'm going to save it for the gross.
All right. Produced and directed by John Badham, written by Patrick Sheen Duncan. It stars Johnny Depp, Christopher Walken, Marsha Mason, Roma Maffia, and Charles S. Dutton. On an estimated budget of $33 million, it grossed just $8 million. And sadly, its box office failure effectively ended Badham's hitherto impressive feature career.
He had a really good run.
Although he did move into TV and he worked prolifically for 2 more decades. He did some great stuff. I know he worked on one of my favorite shows of all time, The Shield.
Oh.
And he's done tons of really, really high quality TV. So he just pivoted and just had another great career.
He's a real Hollywood journeyman. You know, he teaches at Chapman.
Actually born in England, I think.
He was born in England.
Luton.
He was born in Luton. That's correct. I was doing a little reading last night. But his parents were from Alabama.
Shout out to Luton Town. I hope you stay up.
His family was from Alabama, and his sister is an actress, like a pretty well-known actress. Yeah, I believe she was in. To double check this, but she's an actress as well. So let's talk about this gross.
Let's do it.
You know what came out November 22nd, 1995?
No.
Toy Story.
Oh.
Money Train.
Okay.
Casino.
Really?
And guess what got released on November 10th? Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls.
The sequel. Okay.
November 17th was GoldenEye. And The American President came out November 17th. So this is the Thanksgiving corridor, which is
crowd.
like, you know, like Thanksgiving is the time you go to the movies. It's like the beginning of the Oscar season, but it's also like people are home with their families and they're eating food and they, you know, I know a lot of people that go to the movies on Thanksgiving. So this just got kind of buried,
Just
you know?
got crushed by too much heavy
Fair Game came out 3 weeks before. Like, you know, not all necessarily like amazing movies, but all just... There's just a lot going on. I mean, GoldenEye was a monster. Yeah. You know, it made a lot of money, right? So total gross, I think, was $100 million.
I think it was the most successful Bond film, and possibly still ever. I'm not sure.
More than Skyfall?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I'd have to check that. But I think at the time it was the most successful.
I think you're right about that. No, so
that's
it's just
interesting. That kind of makes sense as to why it just didn't perform. You know, because this is a big. That's a pretty big budget for this year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like $33 million is a lot of money for essentially a one-location
thriller,
movie.
With a minimal cast and one location.
At times, this movie almost feels like a two-hander, honestly. Like, you know, so it's like, it doesn't seem that expensive. And like Badham is one of these, you know, I wouldn't say he is the same kind of thing, but he's kind of like a journeyman. He's a producer and a director. You know, you don't see that credit that often, produced and directed by, like as a sole, but not as a writing credit. So it's interesting. Like he's clearly like a guy who understands the business of what he's doing.
He's very commercially like well attuned, I thought, for the majority of his career. And it's also interesting that a lot of his movies end by saying, a John Badham movie.
I like that.
Movie specifically, though, not film.
Right.
He had no illusions, right? He's like a popcorn guy.
Right.
You know, but that's not a knock. I mean, as I've said before, Blue Thunder, I think, is the most underrated action film of the 80s. It's incredibly directed.
I've never seen Blue Thunder.
It's really legitimately...
Put it on the list.
It's an amazing action film. Your jaw will be on the floor in the third act of that film. It's absolutely incredible. But then he also
had... Do you have the blue?
I do.
Can I borrow it?
I do. I'm weird about lending them.
It's me.
It doesn't matter. I'm an only child. They're in a safe that's guarded by 7 layers of security that you'll need a big drill with Theo to get in there, and then maybe the power to be turned off to get at my Blu-rays.
I'll remember this.
I'm a bastard about it.
I'll remember this.
I'm sorry.
Revenge is a dish best served cold.
But the worst thing in the world is when you're like, oh, right, we're going to sit down, we're going to watch whatever, Tenet, and then it skips. Because it's got scratched.
My disc has the one I bought has a skip on it, and I don't feel like dealing with returning it, so I'm just like living with the consequences.
That's the one negative about physical media, which we do support.
We live in a skip-filled world. We do, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, so that's why they stay in the vaults.
Yeah, Philly vaults.
With my bearer bonds.
Yeah, exactly. Guys, the password is helicopter. It's very easy to get in.
Shh. So shall we move on to our next section of the show?
Die Hard DNA. Let's do it.
So this is where we outline the comparisons and links between
and
the film
surprising a number of Die Hard.
Quite a few, yeah.
Quite Die Hard stuff. Die Hard DNA.
The most obvious one I thought, was this idea. It was like the ordinary guy action hero taken to an extreme. And we'll talk a bit more about that when we get to the hero section. Also, it starts with the hero arriving into LA from out of town. And LA is kind of established as this like strange and slightly
It's weird.
frightening place.
Yeah.
Like you see they're going down the sort of like LA River type.
Yeah, I
And
kind of
there's-
wish it would happen along with the live and die in LA
Right.
chase. That'd be really good if it was they were watching that.
Oh, that was happening
Yeah.
concurrently. And it's like in an extended universe, and you just see these two cars like careening down the LA River.
We haven't talked about this, but I just saw that movie for the first time, and it's a goddamn masterpiece.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
Absolutely.
I'm
It's a
annoyed
top
at
10
myself
movie
for
for me.
waiting so long to see it.
Yeah, incredible stuff. But yeah, it is. That's an amazing idea. But it really is like dystopian.
Right.
You know, you're seeing like homeless guys like trying to kill each
It's
other
a
pretty
rather
much as they arrive.
reactionary
And
sequence in the movie,
Yeah,
you know,
it's
which
quite-
has interesting politics as a film. I'm curious.
It's quite dark and disturbing, but it is, again, it's a little bit like, it's not an Oz movie, but there is that idea of like, you're coming from one place that presumably were rules or was a bit more ordered or a bit more safe, and now you're going to a place that immediately feels a little bit lawless and dangerous.
Shades of some of the issues you have with the Last Action Hero screenplay, actually.
Yes.
Masterpiece.
Indeed. Well, yeah.
This is actually something I didn't believe before we did that episode. And then I'm like, it's the greatest movie of the 90s.
You've Helsinki syndromed yourself into believing that. So the other thing I noticed was when they get to the train station, there's like a couple kissing, reminiscent of McClane's arrival at the airport.
Fucking
and that
California.
Exactly. It's like Stranger in a Strange Land. The kid even has a cuddly toy bear, much like the one that McClane planned to give to his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of others I spotted was that a cab driver asking very personal questions to reveal exposition about the hero.
Do you know who that cab driver is?
Of course I do. Clark Johnson.
He's great.
Great actor, star of Homicide, Life on the Street, and director of SWAT and The Sentinel.
He directed SWAT?
Mm-hmm.
He also, I believe, directed and was in The Wire, like multiple episodes of The Wire.
And he was in it in the last series, I think, right?
How do you feel about SWAT?
Journalisms. SWAT's a movie that I think
You just said SWAT.
SWAT? I put a little...
SWAT. It's Ace Ventura. Speaking of Ace Ventura.
SCHWAT. SWAT is a movie that I think is pretty average, and yet I've seen it 30 times.
Yeah, exactly. I remember seeing it in the theater and being like, never going to watch that again, but like,
I've watched
probably have.
Yeah, once a year. We'll do it.
Yeah, sweet.
Renner's amazing in it, and there's some good stuff in it. But Clark Johnson plays a version of an Argyle-like character.
Who can't flip a goddamn business card over.
Yeah, but again, another bit of a sort of racial stereotype, a little bit like lazy cabbie kind of. You know, there's a few like racial stereotypes as well, of like the roller skating guy, and that are not great.
Oh yeah, I actually made a note about that. Yeah.
There's also an Al Powell-esque like peripheral character who offers support and assistance.
He's
to
so
the
good
hero,
in this movie.
The amazing Charles S. Dutton, who's always just like so much gravitas and just such a fantastic
Are you a
actor.
Rudy guy?
You know, again, you're calling me out. I haven't seen it.
Oh my God, Rudy! You're gonna it's gonna reduce you to tears.
Of course,
it's like football.
Because Hoosiers is like one of my all-time.
Oh yeah,
favorites.
Rudy is like. I mean, if I watch it now, I don't know how I feel, but like growing up, Rudy was like. That was like a comfort movie for my family. We would watch it a lot, you know.
Yeah, I need to get on that.
Yeah,
I've got a couple of blind spots I need to take care of.
Not as moving as say Any Given Sunday in terms of football movies, but it's pretty good.
That's my shit right there.
I fucking love that movie. It's amazing.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I don't. Every time I watch it, I'm like, this movie is incredible.
Absolutely amazing. Anywho, we digress.
Yeah, sorry.
Of course, the action is also largely contained to one LA skyscraper,
right,
as well. And the hero has to improvise and use all his intelligence to solve a seemingly insolvable problem,
right?
Which is Die Hard, which is Speed, and many of these other kind of movies. So again, on face value, you might think, well, what's this got to do with Die Hard? But once again, we take it to the lab. We run some tests.
That machine
DNA
costs
is in there.
$4 million per test.
It's like AI. It's like it's sapping too much energy to be a viable.
If you notice your power going out in Glendale, it's because Phil's running the Die Hard.
Yeah.
The Die Hard.
If the power goes out, the Die Hard lab is like there's like thunder and lightning. Like.
Oh, Phil, did you? Yeah.
That power outage last week.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That was why it rains also. He has a satellite. It's like under siege too.
Controlling the weather.
What is happening right now?
Getting a little grandiose here. Let's get back on track. And we'll be into our next section of the show, Anatomy of an Action Movie, right after this break.
We'll be right back.
And we're back with our next section of Die Hard on a Blank, which is called
Anatomy of an Action Movie, where we list the tenets.
We Live in a Twilight World.
And there are no friends at dusk. And by this point, we will have seen Tenet on the big screen.
That's so Tenet because we're talking about something that hasn't happened yet. So there's some kind of temporal pincer.
Well, Phil and I are going to sit down in the movie, and I'm going to be like, soda water. And he's going to be like, you always order a gin and tonic at movies. Okay. Crickets.
That one did go over my head because I've only seen Tenet, I think, 3 times. How many times have you seen Tenet?
I mean, so when we will have seen it, by the time we will have seen it, I will have seen it probably 6 or 7 times, and it will be my 3rd time seeing it on the big screen.
And does it make more or less sense?
Every time you watch it makes more sense.
Okay.
It actually is weirdly a simple movie once you've seen it.
Yeah.
I saw it. I saw it at a drive-through during COVID. Went opening weekend. Went with a buddy who was in a different car, and then I saw it in 35 millimeter at the New Beverly in the summer.
Was it a fast car that didn't look fast?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's move on from the Tenet thing because it's just like much like the Die Hard on a Blank Lab. It sort of sucks the power and energy away.
Disagree. It's only making me more powerful.
All right. So the first tenet is the premise, which is as follows. So mild-mannered accountant Gene Watson, played by Johnny Depp, arrives via train to LA's Union Station with his young daughter Lynn in tow. Shortly after his arrival, he's apprehended by Mr. Smith, played by Christopher Walken, and Ms. Jones, played by Roma Maffia, who claim to be police officers while forcing them into a van. Smith then informs Gene that he has 90 minutes to assassinate the visiting governor of California, or they will kill his daughter. Incredible premise.
Pretty good. Pretty goddamn good.
Incredible.
Yeah, it works really well.
One of the things I was thinking about with this as well is, like, although this is very much a 90s film, in some ways good, in some ways like little stuff that hasn't aged great, like some of those stereotypes.
Yeah, there's some interesting reactionary politics in this movie,
there's a couple, but it's minor stuff. It does feel very much like a film made of its time, and yet I would say it has its roots in those kind of post-Watergate conspiracy thrillers, like in particular Parallax View and Blowout. I thought
both great movies.
I really Blowout as an 80s movie, I think 81, but it still feels kind of like it's trying to process Watergate, it's trying to process Nixon and the deep suspicion of the presidency and of government and all of those kind of things. And it feels like this has some of that DNA in it.
A movie, and I sent you the trailer for this via text last night. I never explained it to you, but a movie I thought about the entire time is a movie called Medium Cool, which is directed by Haskell Wexler, who's like a famed cinematographer. And I'm just going to very quickly read the description of it. John Casellas, played by Robert Forster in a great performance, is a hardened TV news cameraman who manages to keep his distance while he captures daring footage of a nation in the throes of violent change. He maintains this professional detachment when he covers the social unrest in Chicago surrounding the 1968 Democratic National Convention. But when he discovers that the TV network has been quietly cooperating with the FBI, the enraged Casellas realizes that he must too join the fight against the establishment. Now, what's specific about this movie is it was filmed actually at the 1968 Democratic National Convention. So it is a combination of documentary footage and fiction.
That's amazing. I have to see this. It's been on my list for a while. Isn't it a Criterion?
It's a Criterion Blue and DVD. I do not would seen it once.
I would buy it and then not lend it to you if that does it.
It's also available on a universally used website that you can stream things on.
Oh, right, of course.
Yeah, so, but
I've always wanted to see this movie.
It's great.
I love Forster, and I'm a huge 60s American politics.
Yeah, you should see it.
I'm so fascinated
by that.
And I'm
really into
subject.
Movies that blur, we talk a lot on the show about the politics of the movies and how they fit into the milieu of when they're made. And Medium Cool is an actual movie that does, it uses real footage.
Cool title as well.
It's a really cool
movie. That's a great comp as well. It's that's my third blind spot. So that's 3 strikes for me tonight.
Also, there's a little bit of there's not a little bit. There's a good amount of Hitchcock in this movie.
Yes,
you can
100%.
feel Hitchcock in some of the staging, in the fact that we know things that people in the movie don't know. The famous Hitchcock adage of if you're going to put a bomb under a table, the audience should know the bomb is there and the character shouldn't. And that creates dramatic tension.
Well, my first question for you on that point is, Where does this film succeed for you?
So, for reasons just related to life, I watched this in like 3 sittings. I did not, which is unfortunate because it's real time, but just how life played out. And I was still on each of these settings 3 really drawn in. It takes a little while to get going for me as a movie, but it's like a pretty efficient, taut thriller. It's a good performances. We'll talk about those more. I'm fascinated by the way it uses the beginnings of digital technology, like the cameraman with the little camcorder in his hand, like, Badham's, I think, thinking a lot about like we're all being surveilled all the time now. I think that's interesting. I think the weakest parts of this movie are when it moves away from a more like traditional objective camera style into this more subjective mode. And I'll give you 2 examples. One is when he's on the elevator. And he's on the elevator with the governor. When Gene Watson, whose name I want to talk about, is on the elevator with Eleanor Grant and Christopher Walken's character, it cuts to these subjective shots of, Depp, and the camera's really close in his face, and he looks a little woozy. And like for me, it's like the directorial style got in the way there. And I felt like you're working a little too hard with this here. You know what I mean? Like and I get it. It is a little bit Hitchcockian in that it's drawing attention to his inner state and what he knows that other people don't. And I also got to say, the dream sequence that comes about midway through this movie is just like, it doesn't do anything for me. It's manipulative and weird.
It's wild, that sequence, because that to me was like, when I watched it this time, I vaguely remember that being a thing. So for anyone that's confused, and again, there are obviously going to be some spoilers here, because it's towards the end of the film. And basically, just out of nowhere, Depp kills Walken and shoots him. And you're suddenly like, oh shit, but the movie's got a while to go. What's going to happen now? And then you realize that it's actually a dream, his fantasy about, I guess, what he wants
he gets
to
knocked
do.
out or something.
I think so it's actually a really compelling sequence, but it works against the film.
It's well staged, totally.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, shit, fuck, that's incredible.
Yeah.
But then you realize, but it's also, it breaks the film's own rules, because now we're not in real time, because we've moved into a character's subjective subconscious.
Yeah.
So it's like problematic, even though it's like quite innovative. It's sort of it breaks the film a little bit.
Can I present like a theory that I've been speculating about for a long time about this, thinking about the movie, which I think is interesting, is that like, is this movie a little bit about like the kind of impotency of the white male in the 1990s, like post, Hillary Clinton's role in society? Because like, obviously Hillary Clinton's never became the president, right? But she's so central to the Clinton administration. And I feel like there's something interesting in that so the guys who are attempting to assassinate Eleanor Grant, the governor of California, who is very pointedly referred to as the first female governor of California in the movie, are, these guys who are her security force working with her husband, who is being paid off or manipulated or controlled by like a sort of Southern gentleman. It's very shadowy.
Yeah, it's G.D. Spradlin.
He's great.
From Apocalypse Now.
Thank you. Yes, I couldn't place him.
His character's just called the Lobbyist, so he's intentionally like mysterious.
I love it, and I love how he gets away at the end of the movie. Spoiler alerts, it's great. But they're killing her because she's gone back on her promises, and she's sort of become more progressive than they want, which is, there's something about that I think is funny with something she says in the movie. But like, the reason I bring this up is that like, they're like, we got to get rid of this lady. This lady's screwing everything. She's actually like standing up for the people. And Johnny Depp is caught in the middle of it. And it's like almost he has this fantasy where like he can be the hero and he can save the day and he can do all these things. And I just sort of feel like what might be somewhat reactionary about the movie, and again, I'm not saying this movie is espousing a political point of view necessarily, is that like he only can fantasize about being the hero in a way that they can only control their interests through violence, through murder. And it's like, the thing that I think is also interesting is that everybody that helps Johnny Depp in this movie is not a white person. He's helped by Charles S.
That's
Dutton.
true, yeah.
He's helped by Yul Vasquez
Yep.
as the Latino, what I believe is meant to be a Latino, sort of like he's working
He works
in
in
food
the
service,
hotel.
and the
Yeah.
Latina cleaning lady. Like
Yeah.
everyone who supports Johnny Depp is like a working class,
Which is quite
person.
Die Hard again.
Yes.
Like, because a lot of those characters in Die Hard are like Argyle, for example, right? That are and Al Powell,
right?
you know, or blue collar guys. You know, McClane himself is a blue collar guy, and that film does have a lot of like consciousness of the quote unquote invisible people, right? Like the security guards that McClane interacts with in the lobby,
right?
You know, and things like that. They're like blue collar Joes.
Well, and that's one of the best things about Die Hard of the Vengeance is the diverse, to some extent, the diversity and working class.
I think McTiernan's very attuned to that.
Oh, totally.
You know,
yeah.
And this film touches on it. Yeah,
and it's just they're all supporting this like white guy who like is smart but can't quite get it done, and is up against these like kind of they're sort of, you know, we don't get a sense of who they are, but like they're gunning for a woman who they don't like because she's not like following the rules. It's just interesting.
Well, my point on this, and then I want to move into that and drill down on that with the hero. But my point on that was actually I felt that was one of the things that I just found a little frustrating about the film, because it was the political motivation for the assassination for me was too fuzzy and vague. For it to be like, especially for it to be strong enough motivation for the husband to assassinate his own wife. For her to be like, well, she sort of, you know, they don't even say like flip-flop. She just sort of softened her position on a couple of things. Well, let's kill her.
Yeah, no, you're right.
That just feels very, very extreme. I would rather, it's kind of like, it's just a little too bland and vague. Whereas I feel like in Enemy of the State, for example, which has its roots in Blowout, there's
and all those paranoid thrillers.
You know, all of those.
Literally, Gene Hackman.
There's a specificity, right?
Yeah.
Like Jason Robards in the opening scene is trying to get through a bill or trying to stop a bill or whatever.
No, it's a bill that would allow greater surveillance by essentially the NSA.
Right, and so
Voight
there's like
is so good in that scene.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't wait. Hopefully, I have to take it to the lab. Of course, there might be a power outage, but I'm pretty sure.
Phil, are you running tests on Enemy? It's Enemy of the State, honey. Okay.
I'm pretty sure we'll do it just because it's so amazing. But it was just too. We don't know one policy. We don't even know what party she represents. I don't think
she's
assumed to be a Democrat.
Yeah, she's a Democrat.
She's wearing all red though, isn't she?
Yeah,
she's in like
true.
a red. So
well, she says this weird thing also.
It's California,
she's like,
right? So we would assume probably she's Democrat.
But she also says this weird thing about how you can have guns in school, but you can't pray in school. Did you catch that during her speech? And you're like, what?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a little weird. Like I wrote that to have guns and prayers. And I was like, you know, not speaking about personal politics. I mean, I don't think there should be guns in schools, but I'm not talking about personal politics. But it's just like, there's something a little unclear about what's going on.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And it actually doesn't help. I'd rather you just, it's because it's almost trying to say, hey, the politics don't matter. This is a thriller. But I'm like, it's either be a political thriller or don't. A little bit.
Yeah.
It sort of tries to be just an action thriller with a political subplot. But for me, it's like, if you're going to do it, just commit to it, because audiences are smarter than you think. And because it was so bland, I think that's partly why it maybe failed at the box office, even though I think there's some terrific stuff in this movie.
You know, I don't want to divert us too much, but I often wonder, like with these films, like you have these sort of journeyman auteurs. Peter Hyams comes to mind when I think about this movie. Steven Soderbergh comes to mind because he loves a genre thriller that's rooted in politics. You know, a lot of his, and I think he's a genius and he makes great thrillers. To me, it's like this feels like a deeply cynical movie about politics. And if I were to, about the political process and about who controls these things, and if I were to sit down with, you know, Badham, I'd be curious, to hear about his politics, because like they're a little, and there isn't a coherent ideology in this movie, but there's like little strands that are interesting, and like sometimes you have to wonder, like, is the decision to sort of like portray him being assisted by these people of color intentional, or is it just like what happens with the story and the reality of like those are the kind of people that work in hotels?
Well, he's very interesting. There's often like a very, very subtle critique in some of his films. Like Blue Thunder is I would say it's almost an overtly political film.
Interesting.
And it's very much rooted in post-Nixon paranoia and paranoia of the police state and surveillance technology, which you just
I think this has
touched
that.
on. It's very political, and it's very I would say very liberal in its politics.
I think this leans that way too.
Yeah,
but it has some problems.
It just has it's the lack of specificity that's just frustrating.
The black skater at the beginning of the movie is just, and it's not only is it horrible, it's stupid. It makes no sense.
It's not believable.
Yeah.
It's just not something you.
Yeah, I don't.
That stuff's weird.
You know what? This is a huge diversion, but
I love Badham. I really do.
I think he's great, and I think
love him.
I do too. I really like his films, and again, it's like he's the kind of personal. He makes action movies that have a personal bent to them or feel made by like a real journeyman of a filmmaker. There's something. The fact that Roma Maffia at one point says this is a Mexican standoff, I think is very interesting because it's like action movies becoming self-aware, that you can really connect to John McClane saying in Die Hard enough, TNT to orbit Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, and I just think it's interesting that she says the words Mexican standoff, 2 years after Reservoir Dogs? It's an interesting thing I thought I would note. Moving on.
All right. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Wow.
I'm not. I didn't grab onto that one. I'm sorry.
Can I borrow your Blue Thunder DVD? Or are we?
No. I do. I see what you're saying. There is that creeping in self-awareness of action movie tropes.
Yeah, which I love.
Which characters are now giving voice to. But that's partly, I think, that this just falls between two stalls of an action movie and a political thriller, and it ends up being almost a bit like neither fish nor fowl.
Yeah.
And that's why it is like a sort of 3-star down the middle kind of movie.
It is the embodiment of a 3-star thriller,
But there's also something to be said for that. Let's talk about the hero. You just raised a really interesting point there. What I was saying in the Die Hard DNA section, we talked about how historically Bruce Willis as John McClane was a paradigm shift for action heroes, because before that it was Schwarzenegger, Stallone, muscle-bound grotesques to
guys
quote
who look like
Demolition
us.
Man.
Yeah.
Guys who look like huge beefy guys who spend all day in the gym like me and Liam, right? Like those kind of dudes. And
you
now,
finish that
now they're all these pussies. All right. So but what I think is my point is, so then we post Die Hard, we would see a lot of ordinary guy type heroes. Like Richard Kimball in The Fugitive would be like a great,
or even
great
fun
example.
Commentary on that, like Total Recall, where Schwarzenegger's a normal guy, right? Yeah, totally. I love it.
But what I think is interesting about this is it takes that ordinary man, ordinary person idea to like this extreme. So this character, Gene Watson, is a accountant, in a sort of gray suit.
Yeah.
A bean counter.
But played by like an astonishingly handsome man.
And played by an actor. It's really, I was thinking about this. There's so interesting about it because it's like if there's one, I love Johnny Depp as an actor. I think he's fantastic. And what I think is so wild about this though is like, this is a boring guy. One thing Johnny Depp is boring.
Right.
But maybe that's like a virtue because it's a really good performance.
I think he's good in this movie.
I think he's really good in it. But I do wonder if it's like, I just kept thinking, man, like, imagine Jeff Bridges in Arlington Road mode in this movie.
Are we doing Arlington Road?
I want to.
Okay.
Again, the lab.
Honey, are you running the Arlington Road test?
When Jeff Bridges is like melting down and he gets a bit like that and blown away, there's something about Jeff Bridges freaking out, like his voice and getting all sweaty and panicky, that I would love to see as like a sort of almost like a country lawyer type character.
Like a Keanu Reeves in The Devil's Advocate.
Yeah. Or, someone who's, he lives in San Diego. He used to be like a bit of a hippie, but now he's sort of like he's providing for his family.
Interesting.
I could sort of see that version of it. Or, the obvious camp for a character like this is Harrison Ford. But I think the fear with someone like Harrison Ford is you wouldn't believe that he wouldn't just beat the shit out of these guys.
He's too powerful.
Tackle them.
Yeah, Johnny Depp is like model good looking and has like these sort of, at this stage, very slight features and like great chin bones. And like, I mean, he's like beautiful, right? So it's interesting. We were talking about like is there someone else who could play this part? I think Jeff Bridges is really interesting. Jeff Bridges might be a hair too old. I wonder if they were to make this movie now, Who do you think would be good as?
The first name that leaps to mind, just maybe because it's like someone super good looking, but you put a pair of glasses on them, is like Chris Evans, for example.
Right? Yeah.
Like
Totally. I actually thought of him too.
He's the first name that leapt to mind. I mean, there's a lot of,
but it's tough because he's literally Captain America.
He's buff, right?
Yeah,
so this character is supposed to be someone that's weak, and that's sort of
but
the
smart.
tension of and that's the tension of the film, because it's like he's so meek and passive that it becomes a little frustrating for me at times, because I'm like, we all like to say, hey, if that was me, I would do this, that. I'd have roundhouse kicked him, I'd have done this, that, and the other. But if your child is threatened, you really will get to like a primal state pretty fast. I think.
Yeah.
So the way that the character was, I mean, it does make it interesting, because it does have that element of what would I do? What would you do in this insolvable situation?
And I think the movie does a good job of, keeping him guessing and keeping him moving and keeping him trying to like solve a problem that I think is really, really interesting. I want to talk about the passivity of the character, because something I thought was very smart, and then I think the movie actually openly references it. I was like, he's named Watson. Is this a Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson reference? Because he's constantly having people explain things to him. Well, he's always like a little bit behind. And if you read those Sherlock Holmes stories, it's always like, well, Watson, here's what's going on, right? And then at one point, Christopher Walken in the bathroom calls him Dr. Watson. He said, as I read it, I heard him say Dr.
Really?
Watson. Now, maybe this is me projecting, but I was like, I have to wonder if like, he's named Watson. Watson is like a pop culture. It's a name that we think of. Now, the flip side is like Gene Watson is like the most generic guy's name. So, I don't know.
He should have been called Nick, and he should have been called Nick Time.
No, I really think he should have been named Nick.
T-I-M-E, by the way, as well. Just be super on the nose.
Nick would be a good name. Nick Watson would be good. And maybe it's a little
Nick Time.
Nick. Okay, stop. Yeah, I think I don't know. He is a little passive, but I also appreciate that like the movie is made up of him trying to find ways out of the situation and Walken popping up and just kind of being like, stop.
Almost with an almost like supernatural. It's almost like the Hitcher.
Yeah,
he just pops up everywhere
like,
he turns.
What's the horror movies he's in the 90s?
The Prophecy.
Yeah, it's like it's a little bit like
made the same year actually. I think.
I mean,
maybe he was in that.
Is
zone.
this? Let's transition into our villain, Christopher Walken as Mr. Smith. This is Walken is so interesting because he's like he's like what are the big tenets, the things that we think of when we think of him? It's him in, for me, Deer Hunter. He's in a great movie called Pennies from Heaven, which I think of. Batman Returns as Max Schreck. True Romance.
King of New York.
King of New York, totally. Yeah. And then his later career is like, it's a little, like when Christopher Walken does a movie now, you're like, holy crap, Christopher Walken's in it. Like he's become this like presence. But this is a great movie because it's like, oh yeah, Christopher Walken's a great actor. Like he's a great actor. And sometimes I think...
Yeah, we sort of forget that because
he's Christopher Walken.
There was a pop cultural shift that occurred at some point. And I feel like maybe the Fatboy Slim music video had something to do with it, right? Because first of all, it was just that sense... We hadn't necessarily seen that sense of playfulness with him. Because you forget that like... Before, it's not to say by any stretch he's a joke or something, right? Not at all, because this is an actor of incredible pedigree. But he also just became he would play with his image a little bit, like on SNL and stuff, right? His
personality has subsumed his acting.
Yes,
to some extent now.
Maybe there was a little bit of mystique that got lost around him, and everybody loves Christopher Walken.
Yeah,
and we always will. Like, but yeah, don't sleep on the fact that this guy's a fucking unbelievable
and he's great
actor
in this movie.
He's
so good,
amazing in this.
Yeah,
like it's such an intense, electric performance for someone. Again, to your point about like their physiques are comparable. They're both quite slim guys, and they're not. I don't know what their height is. They're probably both about 6
Walken's like
foot.
a little taller. He's a little taller.
He's not like again, it's not like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Godunov or some just like bruiser. They're physically like comparable. Yet Walken is so intimidating.
Yeah.
In this part.
Well, he's a fucking psychopath.
It's
like
terrifying.
When he's like, I'm gonna rip your daughter's head off, you're like, cool. That's good. Like he's scary and
he's really frightening.
And he's smart and he's like on top of things. Yeah, and
he's the best thing in this movie. I think by far. Like he's fantastic.
I think Charles Dutton is really good too,
Yes,
but I would
true.
also say that one of the things that you mentioned earlier, the movie has kind of fuzzy backstory. But one thing it does do really well is just put you in the action. You're just in it.
Yeah.
And you spend I spend as much time being like, is this guy like a Secret Service agent? Like, what's his deal? Like, who is he? And the fact that that's never revealed, I actually think is a strong point of tension for the movie. And he just comes alive, and he's really, really, really good in this movie.
What do you think of Roma Maffia as
little bit of a crush on Roma Maffia? And she's great. And like, I wish that there's a missed opportunity with her spending time with the girl in the car, and like maybe wanting to, like, she's finally like at about the 87-minute mark, she's like, well, time to blow this kid away.
It's
and
so
you're like,
disturbing.
Oh, I feel like they could have they could have made there be a little more dramatic tension in this than they did. But she's good, and the cutaways to her, she's like, I think she's really good in the movie. It's not my favorite child performance in a movie, but it works. And again, the ticking clock is so powerful that you're with it.
Yeah, the kid's a little bit more of a symbol, I think, than a character. Unlike,
I'm a little kid.
Unlike in the Joseph Mazzello in River Wild, for example, as like a dimensional, complex character. But this kid is a little younger.
Well, she's like 6,
so he doesn't
5,
have
6.
the same like developed personality.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and that's partially what River Wild is about like,
But this was like that 90s trope of kids being put through the ringer and traumatized, often at gunpoint.
Shot at.
It's really, really
hard
to watch. Like, we've talked about those movies, like The Fan has a lot of that, Last Boy Scout, they're really rough.
Yeah.
So that stuff is, I would almost give a bit of a trigger warning about some of that stuff because it's pretty intense.
But it's good.
But it is very effective within the context of a fictional film.
Well, the movies aren't afraid to go hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's great.
Well, let's move on to our next section, the action of the film. It's a funny one to think of in that sense because it's really more of a sort of suspense thriller.
Yeah, the only real action scene is at the end, right?
And that's actually my biggest issue with the film because I feel like if this film had a more satisfying death for Walken, right? Like that moment I felt is just a little bit undercooked. We've spent 90 minutes, 85 minutes
hating this guy,
hating him, having the pressure, boiling and boiling and boiling on this character who's like very relatable as an audience surrogate, who is a good father, a decent citizen, and is just forced into this awful situation, tries everything to resolve it non-violently. And ultimately realizes that there's no way around. You're dealing with pure evil, and the only way to deal with it is to kill him. And also Walken is kind of goading him and sort of tormenting him about like, do you have the guts? Do you have the balls to pull the trigger? And all these kind of things in a way to manipulate him and push him. And then at the end he does, and he turns the gun on his tormentor, on his oppressor. But the way that it's shot, for me, with that, it's like you want it to be more cathartic. You want it to linger a little bit. You want to see him put 6 shots into Walken, right? And each one, like, you want to really see, and you want to see the blood flow. You want to see the look on Walken's face. Then I want to see like him fall backwards into traffic and a car smash over it. It needed to be a bit more bombastic because it's like we want to see this motherfucker die because he's so evil, and it just is a bit like, bang, you're dead, and that's that. And it was just like I wanted on that visceral level as an audience member. I just wanted more punch in that death. I felt a little unsatisfied by it.
Can I give you the studio note? More squibs. Because here's the thing. I have been, for the past few days, watching the Arrow 4K of RoboCop, the director's cut.
Oh, boy.
Exploring the special features.
Mr. Kenny.
Yeah.
Would you like to come over here? And
You're fired. Thank you. But the kills in that movie are incredible. Because, I mean, Verhoeven loves a blood pack. He loves a squib. And, like, part of my issue with when he shoots Walken once and Walken, and like, look, I'm not like a death porn guy. But it's just Walken gets one bullet and he shoots him 2 more times and nothing. There's no
it's
squib.
shot in like a mid shot as well.
Yeah, it's a medium close, and you don't see the bullet erupt.
Right.
You don't see anything, and like he just kind of falls down. You're like, that's it. That's it?
Exactly. That was exactly the feeling.
Much more satisfying is when Dutton not worth saying.
Right.
Dotton's a disabled American veteran in this movie. He takes out Roma Maffia with his shoe and like knocks her out. And it's like so much more satisfying than Walken's death.
And she doesn't get killed.
No,
right?
she just gets knocked out.
And she's just as bad, if not worse, as Walken. You know, she's ready to shoot the kid.
Yeah, she does shoot at the kid.
You know, and she doesn't even get like,
Walken
it's more satisfying in some sense, but it's also slightly almost comical that he hits her with his like prosthetic leg and knocks her out, you know, and the old movie trope of just, you only have to like breathe on someone and they get knocked out, you know, like in real, just a quick note on that. An amazing movie that dealt with that was The Last Seduction with
John
Linda
Badham.
Fiorentino.
Yeah, good movie.
There's a scene where someone pistol whips Bill Pullman on the back of the head trying to knock him out. And it's just like, ow! Like, because in real life, like, it's not going to happen, you know? So, yeah, just to kind of conclude, I think the action in this movie is a little undercooked. There's one really, really good sequence, I say, with that dream sequence, but it's also counter to the whole thesis and conceit of the film. So it's not satisfying on an action movie level. It's really more of a suspense thriller, which Die Hard is as well to some extent. It's a suspense thriller, but then it kind of just ratchets up
but it cooks as an action. I mean, it's one of the greatest action movies ever made.
Of course.
No, I totally agree. I do think that this is an interesting sort of paranoid 70s thriller about put in a modern 90s context.
It's an interesting collision of those two things.
Yeah, it really is.
Post John McClane, ordinary guy action hero combined with 70s paranoid conspiracy thriller.
And again, it's like America has such this, the most famous American history is like presidential assassinations. It's what people are, political assassinations. And it's like a big thing that people think about. And so to get it in this context is really, really interesting. And they're like interesting ideas. But yeah, it all feels like it needed about 5 more minutes on the stove, so to speak.
Yes, well put. Well, should we put our tuxedos,
put on my gray suit.
Take off our gray suits and spruce ourselves up a little bit and head down.
I'm going to put on my red suit.
We'll take a train alongside the LA River where, like, it's a dystopian nightmare.
Is that the T-1000 chasing Arnold Schwarzenegger?
With the Blue Thunder helicopter going under there as well. And head to
this feels Ready Player One, but for 90s action movies.
Head to the, is it the Dolby Theatre? I don't know. This is getting tortured. Let's move on. The John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Awards.
Wait, no, we have to say it's the Die Hard Oscars. Thank you,
Sorry
Jesus,
for everyone.
Yikes. Woof.
It's the Die Hard Oscars.
This isn't your first episode of the show.
If it is, you picked a really weird movie, and you're our kind of listener.
Thank you for listening, Mr. Johnny Depp. Okay, let's jump in.
Our first award is the John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best Line. So I've got, I think, 3 here. Yeah, so Mr. Smith, played by Walken's, going, look at your watch. Look at it. At 1:30, your little girl is dead. Say it with me. At 1:30, my little girl is dead. Say it. Say it. Name it. At 1:30, my little girl is dead. Unless you do what you're told. You go do it. Which is that's the movie.
Yeah.
Like, boiled down, it's so aggressive.
Yeah.
The way that he said, because I can't do Walken.
Your little girl is dead. No.
I know what you're thinking. You're like a worm on a hook, wiggling around.
That's
thinking
not
you might get off. That's the other one I liked.
That wasn't bad.
That bit was pretty cool. Like, I like that bit. And then his monologue where he says, which culminates with him saying, put a bullet in his eye. Then I put 2 more into him just to make sure. Now that was somebody I loved. I loved him. But I got the call and I put him down like a sick animal.
I can't believe we got Christopher Walken to guest on this episode. No, it's tough. It's good.
There's not a ton of like colorful dialogue.
There's one line I love, but I want to see if you have it already.
That's it. Those were my 3.
America is a nation of 240 million special interest groups. I think is a really compelling line about the nature of American political engagement and how we care about these things. And I love the little Shakespeare
I wish there was more of that stuff.
Of those 2 cameramen.
Yeah.
I think that would be really, really interesting.
The Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of this piece. So we've got Verhoeven. You can tick that off your bingo card. We've got pretentious
Hamlet.
Shakespeare reference. You can tick that off.
Yeah.
All right. The next award is the Hans Gruber Master Thief Award. For stealing the film.
I'm very curious to hear your list.
I've got, of course, Christopher Walken as Mr. Smith, Charles S. Dutton as Huey is the name of the character, and Marsha Mason as Governor Eleanor Grant. We haven't really talked about her.
She's wonderful in this movie.
I love her.
I think I'd give it to her.
Really?
I honestly would. I think she's really good. She's also like a female presence in a movie full of dudes, except for, Roma Maffia. And she's just warm and she's very smart. Like you think she doesn't believe him when she screams for her like sort of handlers,
Right.
but she's really doing it so he can escape because it pulls that, you know what I mean? It pulls her 2 security guards into the room so he can get by on his way out. Yeah, I just think she's really, really good. And I think, she has limited screen time and she sells her husband's betrayal quite effectively.
Yeah.
Peter Strauss, also good in this movie.
I really love Marsha Mason in 2 Days in the Valley, which is a movie I absolutely
I gotta
adore.
watch that. That's come up a couple times. I feel like
so great. It's
Charlize is in that, right?
Charlize, one of her early parts. Spader, Jeff Daniels, Eric Stoltz, Danny Aiello.
Holy crap!
Like it's a crazy good cast and a really, really great, nifty, stylish crime thriller with an awesome soundtrack.
Did I ever tell you?
She's got a great part in that.
Did I ever tell you about the time Danny Aiello told me to lighten up?
No, you did not. I'm dying to hear the story.
I'll tell you off mic.
No, no, you can't do that to people.
I was interviewing to do an MFA program in New York, and he was the guest at the event. And he was telling a story, and I was just sitting there, like I wasn't. And he like told a joke, and everyone laughed. And I guess I didn't laugh, and he turned, and he was like, "Hey, it's just a joke. Lighten up." And I was like, "What did I don't know what I did." And the guy who was running it was like, "He's an intellectual about me," and I was like, "Okay, this is a very strange experience."
Wow.
But he was like a very charming, charismatic guy, and of course a legend.
I love it. He's kind of the lead in that in 2 Days in the Valley, and he's great in it.
I'm going to add that to the old queue. Let's see where
we've got a few blind spots.
You got the blue? You got the blue on that? Do you have the blue?
No, I actually don't, but I want to.
When you get it, can I borrow it?
It's worth. Yeah, sure. Just leave me alone.
Honey, did you let Liam borrow the Blue Thunder Blu-ray? The blue.
Moving on. The Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the movie.
Wait, you didn't pick an exceptional thief?
Oh, well, for me, it's Walken.
Okay.
For me, it's Walken. I'm sorry. I know. But he's just
Bill Smitrovich, also very good.
Yeah, I wanted to come to him actually in a second. I've got a few bits about him. So I'm a big fan of his. The Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie, I've got Brendan Craig, which is the governor's husband. Or did I say Brendan Craig? It must be Brendan Grant.
Brendan Grant.
I don't know why
it's Brendan Grant.
There.
Yep.
Brain skid. G.D. Spradlin as the mysterious
good choice.
lobbyist. The rollerblader at the train station. And also Peter Mackenzie as Stephen Schuster, the loudmouth reporter in the bar who eventually does a Dick Thornburg-style wrap-up at the end of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
So there kind of is like a Dick Thornburg-esque character
Again,
as that Greek chorus peripheral.
And there's also just this medium cool connection. There's a cameraman who plays a significant role. It's interesting. And like, yeah, I'm going to go with the Southerner because he gets away at the end and like it is that like those are the guys with the real power. The like descendants of tobacco farmers in Virginia and the 70s. Like I just think
the
that's
gray suits that move in the shadows and actually run America.
Yeah.
There's a character a lot like that brought vividly to life in Oliver Stone's Nixon. If you remember, played by what's his name from I Dream of Jeannie.
Should I look it up?
He's a great actor, legend. Why can't I think of his name? I think the character is just called like Jack Jones, but he's played by what's his name?
I'm a vamp.
I can't.
Larry Hagman?
Yes,
yeah,
Larry Hagman.
Has Larry Hagman been in a movie we've talked about?
I don't think so, but when he goes, like, is he in Primary Colors as well? And he's just actually like done some really weighty work in serious political films.
I Dream of Jeannie, yeah. Oh man,
he was great. Anyway, G.D. Spradlin's that kind of character. And Best Death. Not a ton of this isn't like got a hugely high body count, but one of them was the aforementioned Bill Smitrovich as the crooked and ironically named Officer Trust, who is electrocuted courtesy of the courageous hotel worker Gustino, played by Yul Vasquez.
Yul Vasquez, who's great.
And there's Gene Watson shooting Smith at the end, and that's kind of it. I think there's a few people caught in the crossfire. So Best Death.
Next time you have a chance to kill someone, don't hesitate.
Oh, sorry, I jumped the gun,
It's
but
fine,
you
I had to
rescued
do
it
it. I had to rescue
immaculately.
it.
I'm all over the place today.
It's
the
fine.
pressure of like the
Yeah.
real-time nature
Well, yeah.
of this podcast.
Yeah,
we have to get
exactly.
done. And
We're gonna murder our. Okay. I'm gonna go with. It's got to be Bill Smitrovich's death. I mean, that's so satisfying especially because like Yul Vasquez has that moment where he thinks he's going to get killed by the guy in the bathroom earlier. So that's a nice little moment for me in the movie, and that's really when the movie becomes an action film. And when he's being pursued
in the last
down the hallway.
10, 15 minutes. I saw
Exit pursued by Bill Smitrovich.
I saw Bill Smitrovich in a production of American Buffalo at the Geffen.
Wow.
And he was great. Big fan.
He's got a big mammoth vibe.
And a big Michael Mann guy.
Yep.
Pops up in a lot of his stuff.
Well, they look
Manhunter.
vaguely alike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. Your pick?
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, just because the Walken death is just so unsatisfying. So, we'll take a quick break and then we'll move to our final section of the show, the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz.
We'll be right back. Nope.
Fine. And we're back with our final section of the show, the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz, where the scores can really change. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
You up for this one, Maverick?
Let's do it. Talk to me, Gothorn.
Question number 1. Christopher Walken stars in Nick of Time as a character named Mr. Smith. But in which subsequent action film does Walken face off against an anti-hero named John Smith, played by Bruce Willis?
Is it? No, it's not. Let's call Huey. Let's go to Huey's.
All right, we'll go into Huey's shoe shine store for some assistance. Okay.
Wait, is it? No, go.
Okay. The clue is, you're phoning a friend. The clue is this Walter Hill Western.
Oh, Last Man Standing. God damn it. I like Last Man Standing.
Yeah, we're going to do it.
I know.
I'm pumped.
Huge Yojimbo.
Yeah,
Literally
that
Yojimbo.
was a credited remake of Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo.
And for a fistful of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe I didn't get that one. Madeline Stowe is in that.
Is she?
I think she is. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll find out. We'll find out when we get there.
Okay. Question number 2. Prolific character actor Bill Smitrovich appears here as the ironically named Officer Trust, a corrupt security agent. In which Die Hard on a Plane film does Smitrovich appear as General William Northwood, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs?
It's a movie we are going to cover, but we haven't yet. Is it a movie with Steven Seagal in it? Is it a movie with Christian Slater in it?
No. Sorry, I was shaking my head and I just remembered I'm on a podcast.
Yeah,
so I should probably speak into the
the
microphone, Squid Brain.
I got to call out. I got to call Huey again.
All right. The clue is the film's title refers to the plane itself, which is a particularly special government aircraft.
Air Force One.
Yay.
This is embarrassing today.
That's all right. If you get the clue, it still counts. You're good. You got 100%.
Okay. Thanks, Dad.
You're fine. Everyone gets a medal for participating. Question number 3. Actress Roma Maffia co-stars in Nick of Time as the villainous Ms. Jones. Maffia would go on to appear in a hit Ashley Judd crime thriller from 1999, whose title will be familiar to fans of this quiz. Can you name that film?
Double Jeopardy.
Double Jeopardy!
I like Double Jeopardy. I actually watched it again with Emily during the pandemic. I thought it was fun.
Love Ashley Judd.
Well,
Kiss the Girls. Can we talk about how incredible that movie is? It's a shame we're not going to do it because it's not relevant, but that to me was like one of the best thrillers of the 90s, and her character in that is so amazing.
She's great.
Love
Phil, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Actor Peter Strauss stars as Brendan Grant, husband to California Governor Eleanor Grant. In real life, Strauss is married to a star of several action films. Can you name that actress?
I think I'm going to need to get a shoe shine and get a clue.
This actress appeared in a film we recently covered on another podcast and will be appearing in our episode on a film set on a prisoner plane.
Rachel Tickerton?
Yes.
Whoa.
Yeah. I was doing a little reading on Peter Strauss this morning, and I was like, Phil doesn't ask this question.
That's a great shout.
Thanks.
Lucky guy. I love Rachel Tickerton.
She's great.
Absolutely huge fan of hers.
Yeah, she's really good.
Falling Down.
She's so good in
Man on Fire.
She isn't Falling Down.
Yeah,
in Man
she's
on
Robert
Fire.
Duvall's partner.
Right. Man.
Huge fan.
Huge
Fantastic.
Fan. Yeah.
Well, that's it. That's our quiz. Do you have any
Well, I would say that the other
final thoughts?
Well, again, a little underbaked of a movie, but really enjoyable, and like, not to be those guys, but like we don't get enough like simple little thrillers like this anymore.
Yeah, it's wild to think that, like, how cool it would be if this movie came out now and it's like, hey, it's Johnny Depp, it's Paramount, it's Christopher Walken as if that came out now and was like, I'd be like, well,
it would
up for
have to be Pirates of the Caribbean,
know?
Nick of Time or something like that. That's the tricky thing, is that it's like, it's so rooted in like, it's just like a one-off movie. It was never going to get a sequel.
Can I ask you something, like, as a Boston guy, because I as someone who's devoid from, I know somewhat about all the Whitey Bulger stuff and whatnot, but I loved Black Mass. I thought Johnny Depp was astonishing in it, and I thought it was an awesome movie. But I get the sense that maybe people from Massachusetts don't like the accents, or there were issues with. Did you like that? Did you ever see it?
I did. I saw it on a plane, and like, so bear in mind that like that affects the attention. But I've actually been thinking about revisiting it because I like Scott Cooper quite a bit, the filmmaker.
Huge fan of his,
and everyone in that movie is great. I mean, you got Edgerton, excuse me. I
loved his character in it.
And you've got, weirdly, I just listened to him on Mark Maron's podcast, and that came up. He's obsessed with that movie, and he thinks Depp's genius. This is probably for another conversation, but the Boston side of it is, it's a city that has a, to be fair, perpetual chip on its shoulder about how it's perceived and portrayed, right? And so I think, and Whitey Bulger is like, for people there, like a real person. Like, my mother would tell stories about being in like bars in her 20s, and he
sounds a bit like
the
craze in London is a bit like that.
Yeah, totally. That's right? A really good comparison, right? And like, it's just interesting that would be the sort of, it's an interesting take, but like, it's a movie it's like a pop mainstream movie. I think Depp he's a good actor. He just, I love The Lone Ranger.
Awesome
I think he just like, he's really good in it, and everyone else is really good in it. There's an actor named Bill Camp in that film who's a Boston actor.
I know that name.
Yeah, he was on the Queen's Gambit. He was the guy that taught chess.
I'm going to look this up because I know I remember this name. Like, popping recently. I know we're off topic here, but
fine. Bill Camp is a Boston actor who's really gotten a lot of parts recently. And I just wanted to highlight Bill Camp because I used to see him in plays in Boston in like the mid 2000s. And he was in a production of Ollie's Prison, Edward Bond's play. I don't know if Edward Bond is probably a playwright you're familiar with, being from the UK, but Bill Camp is just one of those actors who's, been in a million things of late, and it's nice to see him get this, Hollywood career, because he's kind of like, he would do well in a John Badham movie in the 90s. He's got like a real distinct face,
like a
and a real distinct presence. Yeah.
And he's
he's been on Broadway and in Death of a Salesman.
Amazing.
And he's an amazing actor.
I think it was Midnight Special that I recognized him from, which is a movie I
love
is
that
absolutely
movie.
astonishingly
Jeff
amazing.
Nichols, Adam Driver movie.
Yeah, Midnight Special is absolutely phenomenal, but I can't even think, before I had a son, I can't even think about that film without crying. So to now, I'm like, it's so emotionally intense.
That's a good point.
Like, I don't know that I can watch it again because it's so powerful, but
I
what
saw
an
it
amazing
opening
movie.
night. I saw that movie opening night because I was really in the bag for Jeff Nichols after Take Shelter, which I just think is talk about a hot family
Michael
movie.
Shannon as well is like one of my favorite actors. And, I wanted to mention it last week because he did one of Bogosian's monologues on the 100 Monologues site. And anyway, we could talk about this stuff all day, but the clock has run out here at Die Hard on the Blank Towers.
No one ever says take the shot in this movie, which is really disappointing. I was revisiting an upcoming movie for the podcast where they say take the shot a lot, and I was like, ugh, we don't get enough movies where people say take the shot. Okay, Rachel Tick-Tick-In is in Total Recall, which we recently covered, and on Eye of the Duck. That should be available now. Eye of the Duck is the name of the podcast. Search for it. They're doing a great series, on cyberpunk, and we were lucky enough to cover that with them. Other than that, I'm at Liam G. Billingham on Twitter, DieHardOAB on Twitter. We're on Instagram. You can email us with questions, diehardoab@gmail.com. Phil, you're now on the board of directors at X.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I'm driving a Cybertruck around. I'm a huge douche. That's my vibe. I wear a backwards baseball cap, and my politics are awful.
And he came in and he was like, "What synergies are we working with today?" It was weird.
I've seen 2 Cybertrucks on the street, and I feel like I'm living in a fucking dystopian nightmare.
Apparently, they're already they're rusting already a year out on the streets.
Oh wow!
Yeah, shocking. Next time on the show, Heat, directed by Michael Mann.
Yeah, I mean,
big movie.
Where do we? This is going to be a big one, guys. Like
no real time clock on that one. I can feel it coming.
I mean, boy, I can't wait.
Masterpiece.
I can't wait to dig in. I mean, we've been researching it already for like 2 months.
One of the most film Twitter movies ever made as well.
I just rewatched it. I can't wait to talk about it. There's actually, you might be thinking, what's Heat got to do with Die Hard? But I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Got to do with it? What's Heat? But a little bit
the lab
like
almost
Die
exploded
Hard.
at the amount of Die Hard
I'm excited because
DNA.
I don't know what the Die Hard DNA is before the episodes unless I draw conclusions myself. But
because the results are kept in the same lab as my Blu-rays.
Son of a bit. I'll be over. I don't need to borrow the Heat 4K from you because I bought it for this podcast. All right, well, that's it.
That's it. That's our show. One last thing I was just going to mention that I did something fun and cool on the American English Soccer podcast where I did a Premier League crash course where I talked about all 20 teams in the English Premier League, and we did a bunch of fun things like their history, their nickname, famous players and coaches, and fun things like their famous fans, and a comp for every team with a US sports team. So the idea was like to demystify the league, particularly for any Americans that were interested in it but maybe didn't know where to start. And wherever you are on the soccer knowledge or soccer fandom spectrum, it's like there'll be something for you.
How do you have time for this?
I don't.
Do you sleep? Let me take some of your Blu-rays so you don't have things that you can't focus on it. That would be good, right?
Good times.
Right. Well, we'll be back next time with a book about medals. Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast created and hosted by Philip Gawthorne. Liam Billingham co-hosts and produces the show. Mike Mayer and Michael Sugar are the executive producers. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at DieHardOAB. Rate, review, follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, tell your movie podcast-loving friends about Die Hard on a Blank. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.